me at lunch today. Since he was 16, he's never applied for or never been rejected for a job that he's either applied for or never turned out. So anyway, he's been doing this for a long time, and he's like one of the most respected and one of the best dealers in the world. He's very active on the circuit. You'll see him if you follow him on social media. I think he told me today he goes to 16 shows a year and has some of the really high quality maps you'll see in the world. So his discussion today is about data visualization, maps, live statistics, the name of it. You can describe it when you get up, but I hope it to be very interesting, and by all means, thank you for coming, Daniel, and welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. I think there should be some slides that arrive at some point. That'd be great.
I'm going to ask someone.
It's working just fine a minute ago.
No, we're really there, so.
So the first slide is space.
And
And it really is. It really
it's
is.
now might be sort of a problem. We can start.
The first
air information. Stop collecting your information as we start.
Right away.
A second here.
Well, that's kicking in. I'm going to start anyway. So the first slide, it's a very appropriate start. The first slide is space.
It was all perfect as you came over here and wanted to look at your little first piece.
All my fault. The first slide is in fact a very famous photograph taken from the Apollo 8 mission. And it shows most of space, but it also shows Earthrise. And what I love about that photograph, and it's a photograph that actually sort of spawned quite a lot of the environmental movement, is of the 7.5 billion people currently on this planet, and the 100 billion that have ever been here, only 3 of them are out of shot in that photograph. It was taken by Bill Anders in 1968. And what it demonstrates perfectly are 2 things. One is that we are prisoners of our geography. And the planet we live on, unless Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos have their way, is likely to be the home for all of us for all our lives. And we are constrained by it, and by definition live within it. The other thing it shows, and for those of you who are fans of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of the great imports from my home country, exports rather, is that space is big. It's really big. You just wouldn't believe how vastly, massively, and enormously big it is. And we can't really cope with the idea of space or very big numbers, or the universe in which we live. There we go. Sorry. And so it teaches us 2 things about humanity. One is we're constrained on that planet, and 2 is we're very, very bad at dealing with numbers. Also, the planet we live on is spherical, and that causes a whole load of problems. What I'm going to talk about today is that if we want to discuss how this geography that we live on affects our lives, we need to deal with the fact that we live on a spherical Earth and bounded by that. And we do that by using a solution to a mathematical problem, which is to get around the sphere by making it a plane, how cartography, the problem of cartography is born. And this is a statistical solution as well. So I'm talking about statistical maps. In a way, all maps are statistical. They are all a mathematical solution to the problem of a spherical Earth being put on a planar surface. And this means that any cartographic solution to any problem has that as a criteria that's interfering at every stage in the decision-making process when you're making a map or when you're viewing a map. And what I want to talk about is a little brief history of statistical cartography and persuasive maps, and then deal with some of the problems that the viewer encounters when looking at such maps. And these are problems of scale, problems of tone, problems of interpretation, really, and the problem of geography. So, taking out from a non-map as our first image, when you start to turn that into the Earth, I don't know how many of you watched The West Wing. There's a wonderful watch West Wing. There's a wonderful episode. I think it's called Somebody's Going to Emergency, Someone's Going to Jail, and it's about the great big block of cheese that the West Wing characters have to go and meet these various groups who are not normally represented. And one of them is a fictitious group called Cartographers of Social Equality. So it's a wonderful episode, and there's this lovely bit where they talk about the world map that we look at, the Mercator projection we see regularly, being wrong. And really it's a great big advert for the Peters projection. And apart from the fact that they start off by saying Joe Mercator was German, which is not quite true. He's one of my 6 famous Belgians. But they actually also make a very good point. And if you just hit the next slide, that'd be great. And the point is, this is a very famous meme that you can see online, and it just shows how wrong our traditional, if you look at the BBC, I don't know, probably CNN have it as well, map of the world, how distorted that map of the world is. And here is a very good infographic you see everywhere, and it shows that the continent of Africa is so much larger than we imagine. You can actually fit China, the United States, most of Europe, and my poor British Isles relegated at the top there. And this is not our normal conception. We've got a problem with geography here in making a map. However, this meme you see everywhere, that's wrong too. In fact, if you hit the next slide, you'll see that that's the one we're doing. That's actually not very far off from a Mercator projection. But then we can go to, that's a Winkle triple projection, and that's a Ball-Vida projection. And again, there's a lot more space suddenly appears in Africa. And that's because neither one of these solutions, nor the Mercator projection, is a particularly good solution to the problem of cartography. There is no uniform solution. So this gives you equal area. The Mercator projection allows you to sail in a straight line, plotted, a course plotted on a straight line on a planar map. They are both different cartographic solutions to different problems. And they are both expressions of statistics that make up a world on a map. However, the one thing that's lovely about maps, and as we got good at making them and good at plotting our place on the Earth, is we can see the truth of maps. Especially in the 18th century when surveying and statistical cartography, mathematical cartography got very good indeed, people realised that if I take the number of steps it says on this map, the number of chains, to that location, I will get something that I can see and touch. I will bump into the truth of the map. So we start to have faith in maps. It's not very long after that we start to develop this trust with maps. And therefore, when you have a trust with something, people can then use that trust. And because we trust the cartography, you can then add other information onto something we trust to start making an argument. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the talk, is a brief history of how non-geographic arguments get made using the geography of maps. And a lot of these are taking statistical data that is quantitative, measuring things, and making them qualitative to make them into types. And of course, the geographic boundaries of a map enable you within each boundary to make a type. The very, very first statistics will appear on a map. I think, and I really would look forward to someone correcting me on this, is on Munster's map of the New World, which is the first map of America as a continent, in 1540. And it has on it a number. And that number is the number of islands in the Philippines. And it has on it 7448. Now, anyone who went to school in the Philippines or anyone who studied geography in the 20th century would have learned that the number of islands in the Philippines is 7,107. That was the number that was given from, the 1890s. I've got a very firm nod on the head over there.
I did go to school in
In fact, recent technologies enabled us to watch what's happening with tides and rocks and what constitutes an island. And the real answer is 7,641. So I just love the fact that in 1540 we were more right than we were for most of the 20th century with the number of islands in the Philippines. So that's the first map that has a number on it, but really that's not a cartographic expression of a statistic. The first semi-cartographic expression of a statistic, if you hit me the next slide, is the Hondius. It's actually the map of religion. And you'll see on here the crescent shapes for Islam, the crosses for Christianity, and these little arrows for you heathens in America. And that's a lovely, it's qualitative information displayed on a map. Now that's actually not using numeric data. The first map to use numeric data isn't really such a map, but if you get the next slide. And this is Michael Florent van Langeren's Graduster longitude. Now I love this, it's 1644. So the Hondius is 1607. 1644, and this is like a who's who of important cartographers. So this is a degrees of longitude from Toledo. And you've got here the contributions of some cartographers. There's Guillaume Jansonius, who is in fact Willem Blau. He changed his name in order to not impinge on copyright of Jansonius. Gerard Mercator, Schörner, Tycho Brahe, Abraham Ortelius, Ptolemy, and Magini right at the end there. And so this is actual numbers of degrees of longitude of plotted sunrise and sunsets appearing on the, that's the other side, appearing on a line. It's not really a map, but it's a cartogram. The first true statistical map is, and you'll find there's a little theme that runs through this talk, which I call lies down lies to statistics. Quite a lot of the facts and the sayings about statistical mapping are not true. In fact, the very phrase lies down lies to statistics is attributed to Benjamin Disraeli by Mark Twain. There is no evidence that Disraeli ever said such a thing. And it looks like Mark Twain has made it up. If you hit the next slide, you'll see, now this is the first map I've got. Now these are maps, this is Edmund Halley's map from 1701 of the Atlantic. And these are lines of equal magnetic declination, so magnetic variation. It's a beautiful map, it makes for a very, very nice image. And in 1701, Halley was proposing that this could perhaps help determine longitude, a problem that dogged most of the 18th century in London. Unfortunately, because the magnetic pole moves around a fair bit, they're completely useless. But it makes for a very beautiful map, and our first statistical map. There are about 5 different types of statistical mapping that I'm going to talk about. That's the isoline map. More familiar to us today with probably barometric pressures, would be such a thing, and very useful for joining up linear data on a cartographic representation. The other sorts of maps I'll talk about are choropleth maps, proportional symbols, flow diagrams, and scattergrams or dot diagrams. So this in 1701, the first proper choropleth map, which is where we start using area and to different zones to plug things in, or are the most famous, not necessarily the first, is William Smith's map from 1815. This is one of my very favourite maps ever made. I've had it a couple of times, and it's the first geological map, the so-called map that changed the world. And in addition to the theme being that a lot of the statements made about maps are not true, another thing is that map makers tend to go bust, and they're all rather unsuccessful, and they also, with really, really good statistical mappers, tend to be rather old and retiring. William Smith did this when he wasn't quite so old, but it did send him bankrupt. His wife went mad and left him, and he lost his house. He was accused of inaccuracies, and his right-hand man, or he thought friend, George Greenough, not only decried his map as useless, he then plagiarised it completely. So poor William Smith did this, but it's rather beautiful, and his role in so much of important 19th century science is often overlooked, because of course he was one of the first people to identify the fossil record, and he used it to find one fossil in one piece of stone in one place, and you find a different stone somewhere else. You can guess pretty much that those 2 fossils were around at the same time, therefore those 2 bits of rock were, and it enables you to do some dating. And this is a rather beautiful map. He also, and this is a nice little aside story for you, he was proposing to do a county atlas based on this thing, of the English counties, geological map. And he did, I think, 27 of the counties before finally succumbing to bankruptcy. John Carey, his publisher, in order to presumably recoup some of those losses, took the plates from this atlas and repurposed them, so they ceased to be geological. So you find these little squares to be coloured geologically on the side of the maps. Then he starts colouring them like parliamentary boundaries. And a few years ago I found a 1933 cycling atlas based on the original plates from William Smith's county atlas, coloured in for bicycle routes. So printed on what can be described as public school toilet paper. And it's amazing that this thing was repurposed as 118 years after 1930. Lovely little historical aside. As well as being shunned by the scientific establishment, William Smith really didn't get to have his great contribution to cartography acknowledged. Later in life, people started to realise that he'd done the first geological map, but the fact that, in fact, he'd also started an entire trend in how we start thinking about numerical data. Not long after Smith, the greatest statistical mathematician of the 19th century was a man called Charles Joseph Millard, came on the scene. This is not his most famous map, but he was a academic at the School of Bridges and Roads, or the École Nationale de Ponts, I should say, and in his retirement took to statistical mapping. And this one here is the first map to use pie charts. That is a very nerdy fact that I have at my fingertips. This shows the meat imports into Paris from the regions of France. Black being beef, green veal, and red is veal and green is mutton. So you can see the Normandy cows contributing greatly to the Paris meat consumption. And the south of France obviously not bothering to export too much north. And this is a beautifully simple map conveying a very simple piece of numerical data quantitatively, and you can see the proportions on that. However, Minard's greatest contribution to cartography is the very first flow diagram. This was called by Edmund Tufte the best statistical graphic ever drawn, and it really is amazing. In fact, we've got two maps on here. The one I'm going to concentrate on is on the bottom. The one at the top is actually Hannibal's progress across the Alps. So the main map, and I had the extraordinary pleasure of buying an archive of Minard maps 2 years ago, and I had no idea when I bought it, and it had this map in it, that I was buying the second known copy because it's such a popular graphic. You see it in any book on data visualization, you see it on many books on persuasive statistics, and there are actually only two of them. And what it shows is Napoleon's march to Moscow. So the red is the red, and the return is black. But more than that, it incorporates 6 different levels of statistics. You've got geographic location, you've got towns marked, you have the width, which shows the size of the army. So we're starting off here with, I think it's 340,000 troops going out, 30,000 come back. There's a very, very literally graphic demonstration of the failure of the trip. But also on here we have temperature plotted on the bottom, and you can see the key declines in population are linked very much to the drops in temperature along the bottom. And then we also have directions to route back as a separate line. So it really is just a genius piece of graphic simplicity. Is it a map? Well, it involves geography. It is roughly to scale.
Look at the river crossing too.
Yeah, exactly. So you have a very, very stripped down, simple but beautiful piece of cartography. It actually has 6 different data sets because it's got temperature time on it as well. Obviously, time is represented by the distance as well. And it's very interesting. Just going back to our first drawing, our first photograph of the Earthrise, which of course time and space are very intimately linked. And it's very easy to forget that really time and space on cartography are also can be demonstrated on the same, almost in the same dimension. The next map I want to talk about is another flow diagram, also by Minard, and this is of great importance to your country. This is the American Civil War, and this is the effect of the American Civil War. So what we have here is cotton diplomacy, as it was known, from the Confederate States. The idea was they could perhaps enlist the help of the Brits by threatening to reduce the supply of cotton. But in fact, what happened was that the Union worked out that in fact they could just cut it off. And so there we have in 1858, a vast supply of cotton coming out of the south of the British Isles. We cut it down to a trickle, and then the Unions cut it down to a trickle. And the British, ever pragmatic, start getting their cotton from India, predominantly. Get back to after the war in 1865, and yes, it does return a little bit, but the trend is based on decimated the American cotton industry, and was a very, very important and critical factor during the war in reducing the financial support for the Confederate Army. And it's a graphically simple map to show. This was rather nice. A little note from Minard to his friend giving him the map. It was a part of a collection that actually came from one of Minard's best friends, rather lovely. So that's our second flow diagram. A very different looking diagram. It actually has a map plotted on it. It's not as simple, but again you have time represented with the 3 different maps. So we see we're moving in 4 dimensions. Following Minard, again, an absolute lovely favourite map of mine. This is a bit close to home for my office. It's in Soho in London, and it's the very first epidemiological map. And it was done by a medical doctor called John Snow. There was a horrific cholera outbreak in 1855. So much so that 500 people died in 10 days in this bit of London alone. Just to give you some idea of scale here, you can walk across that in 10 minutes. And each of the black dots on there, and this is a dot diagram, represents a death. And you can see they're all concentrated in one area. Now, John Snow wasn't the first person to propose that cholera may be a waterborne disease. However, by plotting it on a map like this, he was able to not only isolate the very pump that they were getting their water from, turned out to be a sewer contamination, but they took the handle off that pump, people stopped dying. Direct result of cartography saving lives. This map spawned several other attempts to use this style of cartography, many of which are some of the most famous maps ever made in the 19th century. And the next one is one that I love above many others, and it's where we start to see persuasive cartography, so using the argument of one particular set of statistical data and using the geographies around it to have to influence people's thoughts. And this is the Charles Booth sociological maps. It's a map of London poverty. The story behind its production is rather lovely. Charles Booth was a very wealthy Manchester ship owner, and it was in the Pall Mall Gazette there was an article that suggested that a quarter of people lived in dire poverty in London and half near poverty. And legend has it, and after the conversation, after an argument, he said absolute nonsense and rubbish. But Booth was an interesting fellow, and he didn't quite let it go at that. And rather wealthy, he got lots of volunteers and people working for him to go out and measure to find out whether there was any truth to this argument. It turns out he wasn't wrong. It wasn't quite the numbers being proposed by his counterpart, but it was near as damn it. 25% of the London population lived in what could be described as abject poverty, and just short of half were not very well off. And what this map does is it shows where the geographical location of people in these different classifications. So the wealthier in the gold areas, much the same here, and the poorer in the black and the blue in the east end of London. One little side effect of seeing this map is if you compare this with a socio-economic map of London today, it bears enormous similarities. The rich are living in the same places. But in fact, in the 1960s, it would look very different. So we've gone back, and there's a little, you could draw a little correlation, maybe not cause and effect, but interestingly, we now have a level of social inequality akin with 1889 in London, whereas in the 1960s we were much more equal. Then economic wealth was spread much more evenly across the city. But the other thing that strikes me looking at this map straight away is 50% of the population are in the blue and the black areas. They don't take up a lot of space. And the map is not without a value judgment. Here, unfortunately, the keys are big enough on this particular slide, but the blue, the yellow is described as wealthy, upper class, and the black is described as poor, semi-criminal, and vicious. Rather pejorative and a bit of a value judgment appearing on a map.
Where's the Queen live?
The Queen lives just, well, in 1889 in the same place, so Buckingham Palace is just there. She's rather gold. One of the people who worked on this map, we'll come back to it later on, but taking the theory of this in the UK, the first sociological maps to appear in the US, in the next slide, are rather similar, but they show a lovely little detail. So these are known as the single most important work by American women social scientists, map by 3 female map makers, Jane Addams, Ellen Gates Starr, and Florence Greeley. These are the Hull House maps in Chicago. And they show rather wonderfully not only poverty, but they compare it also with nationality. And this is a lovely little touch, of course it's blocks. Further back in the building you go, the higher up the block you are. So you can actually see vertical cartography on here, as well as 2 dimensions, which is rather lovely. This map has a contemporary parallel. And I don't know if you've ever seen this, but if you get the next map, from 2015, this is known as the $1 Million Blocks map. Remarkably, you'll all recognise the shape of Chicago on here. And actually, the Hull House area, I think was, Paul, where's Hull House on here? I think it's actually here, is it either there or there?
Wherever the University of Chicago is, that's where Hull is.
And what these show, each one of those red blocks, and this is an incredible thing, it shows where the block has over $1 million a year spent on incarcerating its residents. It shows you how many people this country locks up. It's called $1 million locks. Just in case you want to know the actual number, much like the Philippine Islands, it's 841 in 2015. The problem is still there. This was done by Daniel Cooper and Ryan Lugalia Holland. And it's fascinating. There you are, 100 years later, almost to the day. And we're still using a very similar type of scatter block to the John Snow maps and the Booth maps to demonstrate some social inequalities and societal problems on the map. I find that map absolutely staggering. But as you can see, what's happening with all of these is these are qualitative representations of quantitative information. And the problems of cartography, when you're starting to talk about using maps as rhetoric, are problems of tone, problems of scale, and then the problem of geography that I discussed at the very beginning. The problem of tone, if you get the next slide, was also relates to booth maps and poverty. One of the men who worked on the booth maps is George Arkle, and he was born in Pimlico and son of a taxi driver. No better qualification was there for mapping London, as I have many relatives who are taxi drivers myself and come from this particular bit of London. I find it a very personally interesting map. And this is a map that shows Jewish East London. Now, in 1899, there was a very large influx of Jews from Eastern Europe and Russia into London. And this caused some societal problems. There was certainly a lot written about it in the press. And this map goes on to demonstrate the concentration of Jews in and around Mile End and East London here. Now, you'll recognise the colour scheme for this map. And there is a little translation using the same colours as for the poor, the vicious lower class and semi-criminal, remember, for population of proportion of Jewish population, and using the pinks and the reds for the wealth and the upper class. There is an implication that there is an equation which is absolutely not at all borne out by economic status at the time. And also, the idea is that there's a very large concentration of Jews. Even at the absolute peak of Jewish immigration into East London in 1896, the proportion never went above 18%. So it's a very small number of immigrants, and that's in like absolutely the black areas in here, of which my grandmother was born back there. And at the same time, this sort of statistical cartography influenced the Alien Act in 1905, and Jewish immigration from Eastern Europe basically stopped until the Second World War. So cartography can have very dramatic effects. It can save lives in Soho, but it can also disrupt societal movements when really demonstrating statistics that aren't that strong. And that's a problem. When I say problem of tone, of course, this I mean tone in terms of colour, but also tone in terms of reception and moral tone. Problem of scale also is demonstrated on this map. The problem of scale is, of course, by choosing to have the percentage of Jews here as a proportion of population, they've chosen to have this sort of, down in the pinks and the reds, it's less than 5%. It's a very, very, very low number of people. But it shows that there's this large number if you're looking at that wrongly. Problem of scale, if we look at the next slide, and I don't really want to tell you exactly which dark recesses of the internet I was looking to find this. But this is a map of world penis size. And you'll see on this one, the cartographer, presumably an American, has elected to show North America equivalent to France and Great Britain. The following year, I'm presuming a non-American cartographer, we get another map, proving that not everything is bigger in America. And here we have the United States being a different colour from the United Kingdom and France. And that's because the person choosing how to demonstrate the colours on the map chooses a different level of scale. But the effect is very different.
How was this approved now?
Well, I believe it was a scientific survey. We'll come back to where does the data come from in a moment. I mean, it's an amusing aside, but it's very interesting. So, and here we have a standard geographic projection, and it's just the choice of your choropleth map here. However, the geography is still a problem. The next slide. This is the British general election of 2010. I'm not making a value judgment about which one of these representations is a truth. Cartographic truth can be a messy thing. So this is a geographically true map. Well, actually it's not, because we're using a Mercator projection. Edinburgh is still shown to the east of Bristol, which is not, it's actually to the west. I bet none of you knew that. And this is a populationally proportional projection. So this explains, so the red is the Labour voting area, the blue is the Conservative. It looks like Conservatives have a whitewash or a blue wash. However, when you do it by population, you go, oh, hang on a minute. No, there's a different story here. Now, geographical truth is being abandoned a little. But then we have the actual election results and how they translated into seats. And interestingly, the Labour voters are overrepresented by population in that. And so we have three truths, or as members of your government might like to call them, alternative facts. And the choice that the cartographer makes depends on the argument they wanted to make. Now, if you want to show a Conservative landslide, then that's the map you want to use. If you want to show how many seats everyone's got, that's the map you want to use. If you want to show how the British population is distributed, now that depends on your argument. So it's not just the choice of the cartographer, it's the choice of the viewer and the choice of the person, the editor, who's selecting it. And yeah, the next slide. Abandoning topographical truth, so losing the geography from that, can give you very, very interesting ways of dealing with data. Now, this is one of believe Steve's brought his own one along, which I think he bought from a very reputable London map dealer. And this is the Harry Beck's tube map, first done in 1933. Going back to our theme about cartographers not having the best economic life, he actually got made to retire shortly before making his map. Went home. He was a circuit designer by trade, a circuit electrician, and went back and thought, hang on, I could make this. And presumably London Transport phoned him up the next day and said, you better come back to work. And this map has had one of the longest lives of any statistical map or thematic map. 1933, it's still in use today in much the same format. We're all very familiar with it. It's a really iconic and beautiful piece of data, but it does dispense with topographical truth to make a very clear point. Now, this point here may not be a political one, but it is definitely conveying geographical information in a rhetorical manner. And if we're talking about dispensing with geographic truth, then you can start doing all sorts of fun things. Now, this has a massive implication today. If you think about how many maps you saw 20 years ago in your lives, you might pick up the A to Z if you're in London or whatever the New York equivalent is to go and find somewhere. You might, when you're going to see a relative, need to get out the route finder maps. But today, every time you pick up your phone and you look for a restaurant to book it, you see a map alongside it. Every time you watch the news, things are always illustrated. You know, what's going on in Syria or Afghanistan or the Mexican Wall. You're seeing a map. There's a wonderful jeweler I met in November who was doing jewellery of the border, Mexican border, a bit of cartographic jewellery. We see more maps now by a factor of at least 10 than we ever did before. We're used to seeing them and processing that data, and we're used to seeing maps being used to make arguments. Some of the more successful ones, some of them are not. If you look at the next slide, I would argue this is one of the lesser successful maps. This is a bilateral global migration flow. It is a geographical map. The continents, Oceania, Latin America, they are arranged broadly geographically. And you can see North American immigration to Europe and a slightly smaller amount going from Europe to America, for example. But I struggle to see sense in that map. It's too complicated for me, it's too messy. But it does have some geographical truth and it does have statistics in it. However, as an alternate and rather similar map, this is a Chile map. And this was a really good education for anyone who's interested in Syrian migration. Here we have the total pre-war population of Syria. The map is only broadly speaking geographical, but it is geographical. Population of 20,000, sorry, it's 20 million actually. Internally displaced, something known as the Great Syrian Migration as a result of the war. They didn't leave the country. People don't like to move very much. They mostly stayed in Syria. And when they did leave, they went to Turkey, to Lebanon, to Jordan and Iraq, countries round the corner. When you look at North America and Western Europe, we really are in not great saviours for Syria. Very, very low numbers. I suppose Germany and Sweden can hold their head up a little high. My own country, Britain, with 4,600 Syrian immigrants. You should have seen the Daily Mail headlines about this.
To map the news to that, it's the completely opposite.
Well, for years leading up to our recent Brexit referendum, we had immigrants. 4,600 from Syria. You can fit them on 10 Boeings. It really is. It's an amazing little statistic graphic that it gives you some idea of. Imagine doing that same map for how, say, Israel and Syria took in people after the Second World War. It would look very, very different. And it's a very, very interesting way of seeing, again, abandoning topographical truth, but you can see the topography shining through on the statistics are very, very clear there. Next slide. And then another map. Sometimes when you see these statistics next to each other, they can tell us an awful amount that you don't necessarily expect. The line from Evan Tufte, which is that sometimes John Tukey, the statistician, the greatest value of a picture is when it forces us to notice what we never expected to see. This was pointed out to me by one of my colleagues. Two maps here. The one on the left is the US Coastal Survey of slave ownership in the southern states. This is the map Abraham Lincoln used to see slavery, proportion of slavery. And this is side by side with the 2008 presidential election returns by county. Look at now, I know correlation and causation are not directly linked, but who would have thought that over 100 years later you could see the effects of slavery being reflected in voting intentions in the 2008 presidential election? That's a really stark reminder. These are very geographically accurate maps. but one of the more visual representations of this time as well as distance and statistics on the map. However, you don't always necessarily see truth on a map. And the final one I'd like to end with, before I take some questions, is a lovely little comparison. This is in our recent Brexit referendum. This is the Leave and Remain voting areas in the United Kingdom, correlated with BSE outbreaks, mad cow disease. And you'll see that the majority Remain in the yellow has very low levels of mad cow disease. I thought this was a brilliant statistic until I discovered it's not true. And it does raise some interesting philosophical questions about, you see this and immediately I wanted to believe it. It fits with my political views. But actually you need to find out where the data comes from. And in fact, the data feeding into this map, however persuasive that particular bit of cartography was bogus. And really to sort of sum up the status of historical cartography and its influence today is of course that all of these techniques are becoming increasingly honed. And we are being, data is being mined and being used to persuade us to do various things. I mean, the expression that data is the new oil. And by allying data with things that we know to be true, cartographic truth, you can't deny that the Earth is a sphere. You see the horizon. You can't deny that if I walk in a straight line, I'm not going to hit the building opposite. When you ally the power of that truth by overlaying it with the numbers and the statistics, you can start to make an argument that people believe. And in this world where there are alternative facts and real facts, it is interesting to think about where that data is coming from and how it's being presented, and how geography is being manipulated to make us think it's good at all. So with that,